until we start getting into those global finals. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on these guys, and I know they put a ton of pressure as well, Nagura, on themselves because they have such high expectations for what they want to do.
Yeah, that's one thing that is so needed for these competitive players as well, having this kind of mentality that if they think they didn't do well enough, then they still want to keep improving, even if they won whatever they competed for, right? So even if they win a series, but they feel like they didn't give their best or they made mistakes that they shouldn't have, then they're gonna, think about it and improve it for next time. And I think Ambition is definitely one of those teams that has this kind of mentality and that is constantly working on improving on their gameplay, on their maybe even class variety, whatever it may be. So I think they definitely have huge potential to do well.
Absolutely.
Right,
I mean,
so it looks...
The big thing to mention as well, I think we've briefly covered this as well, is they do have an MDI caliber player. Nerf was part of that team back in Australia that won that LAN, that global final LAN. So they have that tank caliber player who can lead the team and kind of set up the dungeon for them. And look at them just going for it here, going for that massive pull. We didn't get to see this last week on that 22 bolstering we had last week. We're down 2 levels, but it's tyrannical this week, but there's no bolstering, so they can just pull everything all at once, and they just blitz through that trash. 29% trash count on the board, but it's not going so well for Cryhard as they're not able to deal with all the trash they pulled, and they just have a full team wipe, and that's their Bloodlust committed, so they're not going to be able to go for that pull again.
Okay, the pull that Cryhard just did was absolutely insane. Not only did they pull all of these trash on top of the boss, they also had the Tormentor on top as well. So they did a bigger pull than Ambition. Ambition did not pull the Tormentor at first. They did pull the trash with the boss, and then afterwards, when the trash was dead, they pulled in the Tormentor, they got the Kyurem orbs, and then they pulled the rest of this trash here as well. Cryhard, though, they just had everything on that first initial pull, and it was just too much. One of the casts went through from the Tormentor, doing huge amounts of AoE damage to the whole group. One person went down, and then it just went downhill from there, had a full reset at this point. And they committed so many offensive cooldowns that is going to cost them greatly. Ambition, though, being incredibly efficient, as they, yes, they didn't pull everything at the start, but it doesn't matter because the pull ends when the boss dies. The boss is the highest HP target, right? It is a tyrannical boss fight. So you don't have to pull everything at the start, right? You can pull some stuff at the start, and then once that is dead, you can pull more stuff in later. As long as you just keep cleaving it down, it's always going to be just the same efficiency, really. As long as everything is dead once the boss dies. Ambition was keeping a lot of trash here, actually, as JBC is picking up that hammer before they go into the next area. Oh, and the spear as well.
And they're not even pulling it either. I wonder what the plan here is. Are they going to grab these orbs and maybe go back? Because remember, you need to have, if I remember off the top of my head, maybe you can remember it, maybe you can confirm it. I think it's 67% trash count-ish before you go into the Necropolis in order to finish off your trash count upstairs. So they have to get that 30% or 25%-ish count here somewhere. There's definitely enough trash, but the question is it efficient enough to pull it all together here? Let's see what they plan to do.
I'm excited. They're picking up the Kyurem orbs. Looks like they're not heading back just yet. They might be doing a pretty insane pull here. Maybe even pull the Monstrosity on top as well. That is like one of those typical pulls we have seen before. And even the Patrol here too. Okay, so they're pulling everything in this room that is left basically, except that Necromancer pull that is in a corner. And then also they didn't pick up those corpses either.
Just
standing in the AoE. They just knew they're gonna survive this, so they're not even walking out of the Monstrosity's AoE. Thankfully, it wasn't in raging range just yet, because otherwise that probably wouldn't have been possible.
All right, maybe someone can confirm in our MDI Discord. 65. That might be right. I mean, I don't remember off the top of my head. So let's see what actually, if that ends up being right. I doubt that they're going to be wrong here. Maybe they'll pull something else after the fact. But yeah, they're going to be. I mean, this is. I mean, look at the pace, right? Less than 4 minutes in, and you're going to be pulling a Marth. I mean, this is the difference of that dungeon level plus that bolstering affix. They could actually go for like a sub 10-minute run here if they are perfectly accurate. I doubt it'll end up being that, because usually you're going to get the second lust in the last boss, but it's going to be pretty close.
They're pulling to this corner. Do you think there might be at some tech where they can pull some trash on top? I mean, they still have those corpses left in the corner, but I've never seen anything like this. I wonder why they pulled it over here. Interesting. As they're dealing with a Marth here, they did commit that orb from the Goliath orb that Nerf had picked up. They committed that on that huge pull that they just did, but I think they still have a lot of weapons left here. They definitely have a spear. You can see it on JPC's back. And they definitely have a lot of hammers as well. Smith did pick up a shield, which I'm not sure if he's ever even going to use that for anything, but we'll see. As they're dealing with a Marth pretty easily. Of course, there's no huge offensives they're going to be committing for this probably, just because the next boss and the last boss usually are the bosses where you want to commit those weapons for as well. And the next Necropolis trash pulls. There's no bowstring again, so it might be possible that we see some of these crazy MDI pulls that we saw last season, where they just pull the whole Necropolis all at once with some of those weapons that they still have.
Yeah, we couldn't see that last week because you really had to keep in mind bowstring when you had those big mobs in that Necropolis area. But I want to see if they do end up going for the entire Necropolis pull. That does require some setting up to do properly. Now, we've seen certain ways of teams pulling that together with maybe a mage ice block or using a bop to pull everything. But I'm interested to see how they set it up.
68 now.
Yeah, they pulled. They did exactly what you said. They pulled trash with the boss.
Oh, okay,
68.2%. So yeah, that's exactly what they need to move on. Also, it looks like YouTube chat is helping us out with that too. Thanks, guys. Yeah, so I'm interested to see what they're gonna go with in the Necropolis here. Like, it is possible to pull everything, but I'm not too sure if it's worth it. We see that Billy got up there first on the mage, that on Asuna. But, okay, they're not going to be using any ice block tech. They're just going to be pulling, it looks like, 3 packs together. Let's see.
JPC is using Misdirect here. He's getting some stuff here on the left. It looks like they pull everything.
Oh, it's everything.
I think this might be everything. Yeah, they pulled the whole room together. This is going to be really dangerous. Nerf is popping that orb as well as it looks like maybe, yeah, there we go. JPC also using that spear as well onto the whole pack. You can see just how much damage that spear did with JPC just one-shooting everything. Man. Unfortunately, that a little bit of aggro there was standing in something as his cheat death procced. Thankfully, JPC got off that shift as well to dispel the raging on this butcher to make sure that Nerf's not going to go down with that mutilate that was just about to go off with his 3 tenderized stacks that he had on him. Huge amount of tank damage coming in, especially with raging. And now they also have that priest tech as well. They have the mind control on the Shadow Priest, making sure the Flash Crafter is mind controlled to make sure those assistants spawn and they can keep the Flash Crafter alive.
Unfortunately, this is not going to be the 112 streets run here, as the mage Billy just got both of the first throw cleavers. Unlucky, that means you lose one of the cleavers worth of damage because you have to end up having your tank soak one of them. But you know what? It happens. They still deal with them efficiently at the same time. Not too bad. Let's see what their timer's going to be. I mean, this side of the dungeon is on rails, right? You have to deal with one trash pack, another one spawns, another one spawns. It's the only part of the dungeon where you can't go for the Giga Pulls, so it's kind of set how fast you can get through this. Now, the other question I have is, since they did end up using that spear plus orb for one of the big that big trash pull where they pulled everything, that should mean they only have 1 spear left, and I wonder if they're going to opt to use it on this third boss here, or if they're going to save it for more burst damage on the last boss with Lust.
I personally think they're going to save it for the last boss, just because on this boss here, I think as long as you kill the boss within 2 phases, then you don't lose much time, because as soon as the boss jumps back up onto the platform, you can get him down immediately afterwards with that next hook. But the last boss, though, the longer it takes, the more people are actually going to get exiled, which costs you so much time. So that's why I think a lot of the teams, especially last season as well, were committing a lot of those offensive cooldowns and a lot of weapons onto the last boss, making sure the exiles are not going through. And especially if it's tyrannical, I think that might make a difference in the decision, as they still have to deal with a lot of trash, though. Actually, not a lot. This is the last pack they still have to do. And if you look at the Tormentor debuff, they dealt with 2. So they dealt with the magic debuff, so they're not gonna have the fire dot, and they also dealt with Baruth, right? So there's gonna be the physical damage increase and the slow that they have to deal with in the last boss.
All right, 9-minute mark on the board. Stitchflesh just now engaged. It's not going to be that sub 10-minute we were hoping for a few minutes ago, but they're definitely on pace for something like a 12-ish minute run. I mean, this is blazing fast speed, and this is kind of what we expected based off of the times we had from last week. We were seeing mid 14, high 14-minute times on 2 key levels higher with bolstering. So this is exactly the kind of run that we wanted to see out of Ambition. All gas, no brakes, go as fast as you can, play perfectly, and look at the board. 0 deaths on the board. They are absolutely crushing it in their first ever MDI match as a team.
Yeah, this is incredibly impressive. You can just see how focused they are as well. With Ellesmere camera being there in the bottom left corner, you can see he's also making sure that Hook is hitting the boss as he jumps back up. It looks like they might have committed a spear here, right? Because otherwise the boss wouldn't be that low. I'm not 100% sure.
They do have double prio damage classes, and Shadow Priest isn't that bad on its own. Yeah. Let's see, do we see a spear in any of the box? I don't see that shield. Maybe they only have hammers left.
Maybe. Also, how does the raging actually affect the Fleshcraft? Because bolstering does not make the cleaver do more damage, but raging, I'm not so sure. Do you know by any chance?
I'd be lying if I said I knew, but we'll be able to see here very quickly. If you remember last week, that Fleshcrafter throw cleaver was doing about 6% of the boss's HP, so let's see how much this does here. Okay, they interrupted it because of the combat storm. This next one will go off 58% to... Okay, it still did 6%, so it looks like it doesn't affect it at all.
Well, we did have 45 last week, and now it's tyrannical, right?
Yeah,
so
I
guess it's maybe... Yeah, I guess...
It was 22. I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
Maybe YouTube chat will...
Sure.
Maybe they know and they can tell us.
Yeah, that might be possible. One more thing to note here is that they're timing those cleavers very well, because this boss actually gets a shield once in a while, and until the shield is broken, he does a huge amount of AoE damage to the group, and they're actually timing those cleavers perfectly to make sure that the cleaver hits the boss as soon as the shield comes up, to make sure to just break that immediately. So very, very efficient and very safe as well, as they're almost done here. They just have to get one more cleaver onto the boss, and they also need to finish off the Fleshcrafter as well. And then look at how quick they were. 0 deaths and less than 12 minutes in a 20 tyrannical necrotic wave. Incredible performance by Ambition.
Man.
I know it really wasn't that long ago, but didn't you literally just say before the match started that you wanted to see like a 12-minute run out of Ambition, and they just do 11:43? Man, that is some good proselytizing, guessing.
The man only exceeds expectations, so we had to expect that he was going to exceed our expectations, right?
Yeah, excellent prognostication there, Zyronic. There we go. We found it. Ambition taking game number 1 with a blazing quick officially 11:41 onto that one, Tettles.
Dude, the biggest thing, so it was the amount, their run was so clean, which is what we were talking about before the game started. That was something that we absolutely had to see in a dungeon that can punish you super heavily. Plus, Ambition brought out some really weird tech in the middle of that dungeon that hasn't been seen by a lot of groups before. We're going to talk about it during the replay, but that was so nice to see them being very innovative with the strategies and the things that they are doing inside of the dungeons to be able to snap mobs onto a Marth.
Yeah. Absolutely, and let's go through some of the clips that you got onto us, Tettles. These aren't going to be very long, because this dungeon was just insane.
Yeah, so it can't possibly be very long, but the pulls that they are doing, this was a 30% trash count pull that they had on top of Blightbone here, and this is one of the biggest crux points of the dungeon, where if anything goes wrong here, you have a single death, you have anything, just one minor misstep, you can absolutely lose a full run here. And we saw Cryhard wipe to this pull, and then they were just forever behind by a lot. And on the other side, Ambition just made this pull look so easy. They even pull Incinerator Arcoleth into this pull later on, and they have to just kite that mob around, making sure that they constantly get kicks on it, making sure that they're not getting bitten by those larvae, and just dealing with that the whole entire time. And it made Ambition look absolutely phenomenal. The next thing, that tech that I was talking about, Ellesmere is walking over here, and he's pressing Light of the Martyr while targeting those skeletons, and those skeletons start to aggro, and because Light of the Martyr, whenever you have Shard of D's equipped, it will put the Shard of D's debuff on the mobs. The mobs then start walking towards the group. You'll see them, they will like stop at the wall for a little bit, and eventually they will snap on top of the boss. And that allows things like this Subtlety Rogue, like this Frost Mage, to just be able to do the most amount of priority damage while constantly cleaving down these warriors and mages and other things. You see those little skeletons that are off to the side. They're going to snap here in just a second. And that like little bit of tech in things that they were just doing have such good strategies. And I think that's one of the things that these teams bring a lot of the times is that so some of the live key pushing teams will just do really weird stuff because they know so many different things that have very nuanced and niche uses. Team Incarnation, for example, also does just a bunch of weird stuff all the time, whether it be snapping bosses or whatever else. And Ambition busting out some interesting tech of their own while also playing the dungeon incredibly large, and they do just an absolutely massive Necropolis pull on top of the first pull of the dungeon, where it ended up just being very lucrative for them to do. Just the setup on something like this is incredibly dangerous, and if you're not used to it, then things can go wrong. And just utilizing all of the weapons and playing Necrotic Wake to perfection from a team that we haven't seen in the MDI, it just made them look like they were on another level.
Yeah, and we just got the official word. It took about 20 seconds to be able to clear out all of these enemies in the Necropolis here. Actually, just ridiculous how quickly these teams and how quickly Ambition is able to just obliterate these trash mobs. On the side of Cryhard, I mean, we've seen a number of times, Nagura, where teams are just, they get obliterated in the first pull, their flow is off, their cooldowns aren't syncing together. Honestly, I'd really like to see a lot more teams that are getting into MDI and being newer to MDI. When they go through this dungeon, we keep on seeing those wipes. I don't know about you, but I'd really love to start seeing more teams use the shields for some of those pulls, especially for something like Blightborn that has just frontals going all over the place and cleave damage all over the place, because that 50% damage reduction it's going to be a DPS loss while you're channeling it, but it just can help prevent those wipes.
I'm just wondering which healer you're talking about, because they do have a 4th damage dealer, which is the Paladin.
Yeah, I know.
They have a hard time.
You got Ashen.
True.
You got Ashen doing its job and everything, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I think it's definitely... The one mistake that I think they made was just that they tried to pull too much, because you saw Ambition, they didn't even pull as much as Cryhard did, right? Cryhard pulled so much at the start, and not even Ambition was willing to even attempt that at all, because there were so many interrupts that they need to do on this Tormentor on top of the trash as well, and then they didn't even have those orbs yet from the Goliath, the Kyrian orbs either, so they were just relying on their pure damage output to deal with this trash before they died to some of those interrupts going through, and it just didn't work out. So it definitely was a little bit too risky for them. And then afterwards, of course, it makes sense that if this initial pull goes wrong, it just happens to so many teams that they just wipe over and over and over, because they're not having those cooldowns anymore that they were committing for that, or that they need for this pull. So it was no surprise that afterwards just more things went wrong. But yeah, now in this Plaguefall, another one of those dungeons where it can be incredibly fast, right? This is a dungeon that can be done in 12 minutes as well, approximately. But you have to do those really risky pulls again. And if you look at the affixes, Bursting and Volcanic, not preventing you from doing any of that. So unfortunately for Cryhard, it's going to be another one of those dungeons where you just kind of have to go for these big pulls.
Yeah, and Ambition, we talked about it you talked about it specifically, Zyro, going into it, that, hey, you don't want to see them playing safely. They didn't. They put together an excellent run, of the caliber we're expecting from them. Now we're going into another huge dungeon, another dungeon that can be done very fast, but can be just extremely painful if you have any sort of mistakes.
Yeah, and again, it's hard to benchmark exactly how fast they should be going in these dungeons compared to last week. Last week we had 19 fortified in Plaguefall, and yeah, some of our best teams, Perplex, crushed this dungeon, 12-26. This week it's 21 tyrannical, so those bosses are like essentially 4 key levels higher. It wouldn't surprise me if this dungeon took 2.5 minutes longer, so I'd say like a really good time would be somewhere around that upper 14, lower 15. That's the mark I want to see Ambition reach for here. But we do need to keep an eye on Cryhard as well. Like, they're not just completely down for the count. Yeah. They could play well here too.
Yep, it's time for Cryhard with a vengeance as game number 2 gets rolling here versus Ambition as Plaguefall gets started.
Where are they going?
All right, so yeah, they're actually taking a little bit of a different route here, interestingly enough. Not exactly sure why, but it looks like they're picking up still a pretty big... oh, they skipped the big guy, basically, yeah, so that was the reason behind it. They didn't want to deal with this, the big construct walking around. Cryhard doing an even bigger skip as they immediately just go into Globgrog and pulling those slimes as well. So just a different approach here from Ambition and Cryhard.
Well, not only did they skip the big giant, they also skipped that initial 3-pack as well. That kind of sits at the opening. That's interesting. I don't think I've ever seen anyone use that route before. I was really confused when I saw where they were on the screen when we loaded in there. But yeah, that pull is a tiny bit smaller than what we're used to seeing because of that. Maybe they've got some extra count throughout the dungeon, but regardless, still a big pull and still able to deal with it relatively cleanly. Everything goes down. They didn't even commit Bloodlust to it there. They're all trying to siphon their anima, even though they're standing in the fire on the ground. They had to cast Siphon Anima like 5 times to get their buff. It's okay, it's okay. Meanwhile, Cryhard has dealt with all those slimes in the room, and they're on to Globgrog, which is what Ambition is just now pulling and have committed their Bloodlust to.
Yeah, so quickly talking about the comp, it's actually a mirror comp here that they're going for. The only difference is that we see a Fire Mage on Cryhard's side, while Asuna on Ambition is playing Frost. So a little bit of a different in choice of spec here. Asuna also playing Venthy or Frost Mage. We've seen a lot of Night Phase being played, but now in this dungeon he prefers to play Venthyr, while of course the Fire Mage is sticking to that Nightway Covenant. And now they're also engaging Globgrog, and look how fast they're dealing with Globgrog's HP here, because they pulled the boss quite a lot later, and now they're not only like 20% behind. They also committed the last for the boss. Both of them did, actually. And they have this extra buff from the Tormentor, so that's something you have to look at as well. I really wonder if Cryhard is going to completely skip that first Tormentor and deal with the fire duct on the last boss, because otherwise I don't necessarily see why they're skipping the Tormentor to do the boss first, because otherwise, like, you're just missing out the buff, right? The buff usually is something you want to go for immediately.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think of is they want to get their Bloodlust on cooldown literally right away, but I don't think that's that big of a deal,
True.
Because if this dungeon is going to be in that 15-minute range that we're talking about before the key started, you should be totally fine popping your Bloodlust 1 or 2 minutes into the dungeon and getting one pull out of the way that you don't need it for first. So just a little bit of inefficiencies in the routing, and yeah, exactly. They're going back and dealing with that Incinerator right now. Might even pull a little bit of trash on it. Might not, might just single target it down. But yeah, I mean, it's so crazy how much damage Holy Paladins are capable of doing, even after the nerfs in 9-1. I mean, you saw them flexing their 4th DPS muscle on that boss right there. Ellesmere was bursting as high on the boss plus the slimes as their Frost Mage was, doing almost 100k DPS bursts. It's insane.
Yeah, it's definitely crazy just how much damage they can do, and it's so valuable. This is why, especially in some of these like faster dungeons, they really plan out the route according to that Ashen Hollow, because Ashen is definitely the longest DPS cooldown they have as a group, right? All the other DPS classes, their cooldowns are quite a lot shorter than that 4-minute cooldown, so they really are planning out their routes perfectly around the Ashen, making sure they have it in the correct moment, making sure that it also lines up with the Bloodlust as well whenever they are deciding to use it. And now Ambition doing some pretty big trash pulls. They started with the left side first, pulled some of the Plague Rocks on top of the higher HP mobs, and now they're doing some of the Plague Binders and Slimes here. One thing to note about PLAGUEFALL specifically is that they changed this dungeon 9.1, and the Plague Borers that used to be here, they have a different name now and they don't explode anymore. So you cannot use those explosions in your favor anymore to deal with the trash. You still do have the Plague Borers in the mini-boss room that is going to happen right after this room, but it only spawns a certain set of bombs, and then afterwards they will stop spawning. So last weekend, we basically saw teams almost ignore the bombs and not use them at all. They just like ran through the dungeon and just killed everything as they went. But the key was also lower, it was a 19, and now it's a 21. So we'll see if they actually make use of those bombs a little bit more.
Yeah, we specifically saw them shroud through that tentacle gauntlet just so they'd have to deal with any of the tentacles and only kill the mini-boss, so they didn't have to worry about that gauntlet at all, which is such a hugely different strategy from what we were used to last season, where you would just use those bombs for the first, like, 5 minutes in the dungeon and get 60% of your count. So, yeah, it's cool to see how different balancing of dungeons changes the whole strategy here. Now you can see they are doing that. They're using that shroud, skipping past as much of this gauntlet as possible, and just going to be going straight into the mini boss. So yeah, not too much of a different strategy from last week. I don't think that the key level or the tyrannical versus fortified is really going to change what you want to do here. Just killing those individual tentacles is so slow and so inefficient count-wise now that the bombs don't do anything that it's not something you really ever want to deal with.
Yeah, that's something we definitely see a lot in this in the MDI. Just anything that cannot be moved around, like these tentacles, they usually just decide to skip that kind of trash because there rarely is anything you can pull on top of it, and it just makes it incredibly inefficient, even when you have those bombs to help you out. So it looks like they used the last spawn of Plague Borers, though, to deal with this trash pack. So still a pretty efficient pull, so they used their bombs for only the mini-boss and for one trash pull. So still decent efficiency got out of this, out of the bombs, as they're now engaging Dr. Ikis, as well as 2 trash packs. So still pretty dangerous to deal with this. I think a lot of the cooldowns are not actually back up just yet, so this might be a little bit of a difficult time here to start, but it looks like 1C is dealing with the trash just fine, as he's doing ATK DPS on all of those trash mobs.
Yep, Onesie's there to blast AoE, and JPC, the man, and Billy on the mage there are just there to do single target damage. And you can see all the trash dies, boss is phased, perfectly executed. Now, similar strategy to what we've seen. I imagine they're going to be completely ignoring this first Plague Bomb and using all of the different choices and types of immunities they have across the board to deal with this first virulent explosion. Now, the question is 21 Tyrannical a high enough key level to where you can burn the boss past the second explosion? Because the boss starts to have a lot of HP once you get into these 20 Tyrannical levels.
I definitely think it's going to be close. And I think if they make any sort of mistake with the slime, with the damage reduction slime, it's not going to work out. But I do think they should have enough, if they save some of those offensive coolness that they still have left, to be able to deal with it. But it's going to be all on, I believe it's going to be Ellesmere probably that will taunt out the slime and deal with it. But yeah, it looks like they are committing. You can see everyone is still targeting Dr. Ikis. We see the Ring of Peace coming out by 1C, making sure the slime immediately got pulled away. And now we saw a blind as well come out of JPC, making sure that... but yeah, it's actually kind of close. As you can see, the boss is kind of not dropping now. Yeah, they are fine. They're fine. Okay, they still have a couple of seconds left here. There was some burst left. As JPC was, I think he was just committing his cooldown there at the very end, as to make sure that they have enough damage. Seems a little. Maybe they can sometimes save it in practice. It's possible that that's something that they can save. And then when they saw that it was kind of close, we just decided to pop this cooldown here to make sure that they're getting damage done. And they skip another Tormentor here, so I think the last boss might be pretty hard with quite a lot of Tormentor debuffs.
I mean, we saw this from teams last week. Again, 19 Fortified, we saw this from teams last week. Not killing Execution of a Root, having that damage reduction cooldown, damage reduction buff, rather, on the last boss. And that kind of stacks up with the other debuffs, right? Not being able to heal your teammates on, on this boss, on Stradama, that's pretty scary on 19 Fortified. On 21 Tyrannical, that sounds like suicide to me. But again, this is what we wanted to see from them. We said this before the first dungeon in this series. We want to see Ambition go as fast as they can, show us what you got, and they're going for just that. I think I would be a little bit disappointed if they pulled Execution of a Ruth, and they're just going all the way in. They're pulling Venomblade with the trash. Let's go.
This is a double ambusher pull, triple ambusher actually, triple ambusher pull with Venomblade as well. You can see all those spiders casting that ambush. They need to be interrupted somehow. Let's see if they have something left. It looks like they just AoE'd them down. Oh, and the Frost Nova coming out of Asuna, making sure it's interrupted last second. And there's so much trash still alive. This looks absolutely crazy, just how many mobs there are on top of the boss. Just doing a huge amount of AoE damage as well. And then the bursting just keeps coming out on the group. And Ellesmere doing a really good job keeping everyone alive with the Ashen being popped too. They held the Ashen for this, I'm pretty sure. I think they had used it on that first boss and then held it all the way for this, specifically because they wanted to do that boss pull. The only map that is left is this one sniper in the corner, and it looks like they might want to engage that as well. I'm not sure, it doesn't look like it just yet.
Are they even in
Maybe
combat
they
with
wanna
it? It's not CC'd, is it? I don't see a sap
Yeah,
or
it's
paralysis on it. Well, they're gonna.
There
pull
we
into
go.
it
So
anyways.
now they're engaging it. Yeah, I don't think they were in combat with it, but I guess they just decided to pull it later on. The sniper is another mob that just can be dangerous to deal with. But yeah, that was an absolutely crazy pull. That was so well executed.
I mean, every other mob in the group is accountable damage, right? It's either casts or tank damage. The sniper is one extra added variable that'll just randomly shoot players in your group, so it'll be an extra amount of random burst damage on one player that's really difficult to deal with as a healer, especially as a Holy Paladin. So you just remove it from the equation. You do big pull, you CC the sniper, so you don't have to worry about those extra little chunks of damage going on one single person, so that there's less chance for one person to get one shot. And, you know, that helps for things like bursting stacks as well, right? If you're getting ticked down by bursting, a random shot to the head could just kill you from one of the snipers. So just really safe play when you're going for that insane strat. And it looks like they're on pace for that mark that we were talking about, that high 14, low 15 mark, killing Dominant Venom Blade at around 11:30, I think it'll be on the board when they get this down. Gives them 3 minutes to deal with Margrave's Dynama in the trash in room. I think they're on pace for that. I think they can do it.
And they're definitely incredibly fast. As the boss goes down, Venom Blade goes down, they're moving on. Of course, they have enough trash to be able to get the last percentage downstairs, so they don't have to pull anything extra. They made sure the Bloodlust... I mean, they literally couldn't have used Bloodlust on any other boss because they're only 11 minutes in the dungeon, so they really only just got the lust back up for this last boss. Ellesmere getting some mana as the rest of the team doesn't really just need Ellesmere just yet before they gathered up this pull. Bursting can be a little bit of a problem here in this pull, and keep in mind they don't really have any master spell or anything to help them out. They are playing dwarves, all of them except Nerf, of course. So they can get rid of those bursting stacks, and they have made use of that dwarf racial a lot before as well. On those other trash pulls that they were doing, really valuable. A lot of those alliance racials specifically for the MDI are so good, and that's why we see dwarves mainly, and sometimes we also see those night elves, making sure they can shut them out off the aggro of certain pulls or certain trash packs. But yeah, Ambition doing a really good job dealing with this last trash room. Not much you can do other than making sure you're focusing Iker here, the mini boss, because once the mini boss dies, the boss triggers, the rest of the mobs, they have a lot less HP and they can just be passively cleaved down.
Oh yeah, and here we go, sub 13 minutes. Margrave's Dynama being engaged. They have the Bloodlust available. Probably won't pop it in this first phase since they have all of their actual damage cooldowns available. I'd probably guess it'd be popped in the second phase, or maybe whenever the Wings Ashen is up for Ellesmere. I think that should be in about a minute here, as you can see by the timers at the top of the screen. Is that new, by the way? Are those countdown timers new? I know we've had the cooldowns, but I don't think we've ever had the numbers before. I digress, though. First phase, first infectious rain going out. They do get the full channel, but shouldn't be too big of a deal. Everyone has plenty of personals available right now.
Yeah, I mean, this is still very dangerous, though. As you can see, even in the intermission phase, if you don't attack those ads, you won't have the debuff from the Tormentors. As you can see, Ellesmere, for example, did not attack any of the Devoted, so he's the one, or the only one without those debuffs. But the important thing is that they're getting through these boss phases as quickly as possible. It's very likely that they assign all of those offensive cooldowns exactly for specific phases. We see the Bloodlust being popped now, so the Bloodlust should be carrying this phase. Hopefully they're not gonna get more than one rain, because one rain is already difficult to heal with that 50% healing reduction that they have on them, right? So they need to make sure that they get as little ticks as possible. You can see the boss is casting it right now. Cloak being used by JPC, the rest of the cooldowns just being saved. Actually, no, Asuna blocking as well. So we see both Cloak and Block being used to make sure they survive this. And now they're gonna have one more rain to go through, though. I'm pretty sure in the last phase they're gonna get one extra rain. So that's gonna be the last difficult check they have to meet before this boss goes down.
Yeah, and I mean, that's totally fine. Actually, probably preferable that they use their immunities or personals in this phase, because they're going to have the Ashen Hollow for the next phase. They should be able to passively heal through the first Infectious Rain. The only danger would be if they get the second Infectious Rain, but with the Ashen coming out right now, the wings are popped. They have the cooldowns rolling. they should be totally fine. I mean, all the 2 minutes are up. This boss is getting absolutely destroyed. Unfortunately, not going to be sub 15 minutes, but still, this is an insanely fast run. And again, a 0-death run. Ambition playing completely perfectly. 0 deaths throughout the entire series in their first ever MDI match. What more could you ask for from this team? These guys definitely showed what they have to bring to the table in this first matchup.
That's right. Ambition, they're incredibly good. I don't think that they had any deaths in their necrotic wake. Maybe they had just
entire match.
They had none.
Deaths.
None? Okay. That's what I thought. But no deaths at all throughout their 2 games there, going through 2 extremely challenging dungeons to be able to do as quickly as they did. Overall, that was less than 30 minutes for both those dungeons there, Tettles. Excellent job here by Ambition to take that 2-0 sweep.
Yeah, and being able to play 3 of those tormented mobs with Margrave Stradama, having the good presence of mind to know to not get in combat with those little small